McGrowl, Book 2, It's a Dog's Life. Chapter 1. Finders Keepers. Thomas was getting worried. It was 5:30 and McGrowl was nowhere to be seen. Supper time was the one time of the day the dog could be counted on to be on time. Thomas sauntered into the kitchen and did his best to appear casual. "Any golden retrievers in this part of the house?" "Better not be," his mother swiftly replied, furiously whisking a mass of gooey egg whites into foamy little white peaks. "Your father will be home any minute." Mr. Wiggins was doing his best to get used to the idea of living under the same roof as a dog, but he was still frightened out of his wits at the very sight of McGrowl. In fact, he had made Thomas take a solemn oath never to allow the animal anywhere near him. Every night Mr. Wiggins listened to another one of the desensitizing tapes that Mrs. Wiggins had ordered for him. The series was titled Pets, Panic and You, and it wasn't helping. Last night's tape gently urged Mr. Wiggins to put his fear into a paper bag, crumple it up and throw it into the garbage. The voice on the tape droned on. "Tell yourself the animal is your friend and you have nothing to fear." "Fat chance," Thomas's father had said to himself as he checked the lock on his door and clutched the can of dog-gone he had taken to carrying with him everywhere. The tapes were supposed to be making Mr. Wiggins less afraid of dogs, but seemed to be having the opposite effect. "I'll be in the backyard," Thomas suddenly announced, and ran outside to look for McGrowl. "That's nice," Mrs. Wiggins replied. She wasn't really paying attention. "Whatever you do, don't get that shirt rumpled. I don't have time to iron it again." She had a million things to do before Mr. Lindquist and his wife arrived for dinner. Mr. Lindquist was Thomas's father's boss, and whenever he came to dinner, which was about once in a blue moon, everybody had to look their best. Thomas could tell in a flash that McGrowl was definitely not in the backyard. It seemed like only yesterday that McGrowl had come to live with Thomas. Actually, it had been 3 weeks, 2 days, and 16 hours. Thomas had come upon the bedraggled animal in the ravine one rainy Saturday afternoon, and it had been love at first bark. The boy still couldn't believe his good fortune. He had been asking for a dog ever since he was old enough to talk, and although nobody but his friend Violet knew it, this was no ordinary pet. McGrowl's molecules had undergone a massive transformation after an unfortunate encounter with a power plant and about 30 million volts of electricity. A perfectly ordinary dog chased a pesky cat into an energy field and emerged with bionic superpowers, the likes of which had never been seen in any animal, or person for that matter. The dog was the strongest, fastest, and smartest animal in the world, but even more amazingly, McGrowl shared with Thomas a telepathic connection which would have made him the envy of every boy in his school had Thomas chosen to reveal it. But Thomas and Violet decided long ago never to reveal the dog's superpowers to anyone. Like Batman and Superman before him, McGrowl would keep his extraordinary abilities under wraps. Only the forces of evil he combated so courageously would ever come to know the special powers he possessed. Thomas finished searching under the crawl space beneath the garage and forlornly surveyed the empty yard. The boy was frantic. The dog wasn't on the roof or up a tree or in any of his other favourite hiding places. Thomas dashed across the street and went straight to Violet's house. She would know what to do. A minute later, Thomas and his best friend, and only friend, were combing the neighbourhood. "Has he ever done this before?" Violet inquired. Thomas thought for a moment. Not really. Violet did her best to put a positive spin on things. "Well, let's not jump to any hasty conclusions." "Right," Thomas replied tersely, and redoubled his efforts. But the leap had already been taken, and both children were absolutely certain that the dog was in some kind of danger. "Here, McGrowl!" he yelled. There was a force of evil on the loose somewhere in Cedar Springs. A malevolent stranger and his wicked accomplice had attempted to kidnap McGrowl several weeks ago and then had vanished into thin air. What if they were back? What if they'd already captured McGrowl? In their quest to destroy this peaceful little town of Cedar Springs, the stranger and his accomplice could take on the shape and form of anyone they chose. They would be impossible to recognize the next time they struck. In fact, at that very moment, the evil duo were hatching a scheme so clever, so diabolical, it would require every ounce of Thomas's and Violet's, and especially McGrow's, ingenuity and abilities to undo it. And then they spotted McGrowl. He was 5 yards down the street and across the alley, waiting for the neighborhood cat to emerge for her evening constitutional. He hated that cat. He was sitting still as a statue as he prepared to pounce on his prey. He looked so happy and excited Thomas couldn't even get angry. "I should have known," he said, quietly and with much relief. "So where's that cat?" Violet whispered. Thomas pointed overhead. The cat, sensing the presence of the dog, was carefully and silently creeping out an upstairs window and slinking onto a large branch of the tree that had grown up alongside the house. McGrow's super hearing detected the bending of a twig immediately. He looked up, saw the cat, and realized he'd been outsmarted. By a lowly feline, this was almost more than a grown dog could bear. "You'd better get back in your room before my dad gets home. We've got company coming." Thomas turned on his heel and started back to the house. McGrowl decided to obey. He was eager to leave the scene of his failure. Silently, he cursed the cat and immediately started hatching another plan to capture her. "Don't even think about it," the boy replied firmly, and kept on walking. The telepathic connection worked in both directions. The dog gave him an extremely sheepish and apologetic look and followed obediently. "Good dog," Thomas said, reaching down to scratch him behind the ears, his favourite scratching place. McGrowl could be very well behaved when he felt like it. Trouble was, he didn't always feel like it.